I have a strange relationship with Settlers of Catan, which is I don't play it. I don't play it at all. Which maybe is not that strange actually, but it's how I got there, which may be a little more interesting. Um, After college, I had devoted myself to the pursuit of multiple PhDs in my academic career, and so I had suspended my gaming hobby, and I came back to it only a couple of years later. But when I decided to start playing games again, at that point I didn't know any gamers anymore. They had all moved out of town. I also had moved to another town. So I picked up, I don't remember how or where, Settlers at some point, and that was a game that I could play with the people that I knew at the time, because it was a game that I could play with non-gamers. Unfortunately, it was also pretty much the only game that I could play at the time, and it means that I had this sort of transitional period, like when I went back to play some games, or some game, it was Settlers, before I got back into the gaming hobby full time. Before I realized, well, maybe if I go around and look for gamers, I'll be able to play different games. But for a period of maybe a year or so, maybe more, Settlers was all that I played. I wouldn't play it every week, but when a game was played, it was Settlers. I play Settlers of Catan way too much. That was several years ago. I'm still burned out. I still cannot bring myself to play a game of Settlers. I acknowledge the importance of the game as a gateway game. It's great that it has given more visibility to the hobby among non-gamers, but to me personally, I'm done. I'm done. However, a couple of days ago, I see a copy of Catan Junior in a store, and I think, well, what the heck? The Settlers was a good gateway game for adults. I think Catan Junior may be a good game for my daughters, a gateway game. And she has played King of Tokyo recently, which is her favorite game at the time, and the idea of rolling dice, collecting resources, that's what she really likes about King of Tokyo, so I thought maybe this would work. So I decided to pick up a copy of Catan Junior. I played it with my daughter Amelia, and I can already tell you she enjoys it. She enjoys it very much. Now, let me show you how the game works, and then I will add a little bit to my general assessment of Catan Junior. I will share some impressions after I played the game with my 4-year-old daughter. The board is double-sided. This is the side that you use for 3 or 4 players, and you use the opposite side for 2-player games. As you can see, there is a system of violence over which the hexagonal net of Catan has been imposed. Players select a color, grab all the pieces of that color. The pieces are 2 types. There are these pirate ships, and then these buildings here, which we affectionately call castles. And you start with 2 such castles and a ship, which you place on the board on areas indicated by dots of your color. There is the ghost of a pirate here. It has the role of the robber in regular Settlers. By the way, playing the game with my daughter, we don't call it the ghost, we simply call it the pirate, because you really should not mention ghosts with your little children unless you really don't like sleeping through the night. There are 5 resources in this game: wood, molasses, gold, goats, and swords, and you place 1 of each in that area there. That is the marketplace, and players will be allowed to trade from their personal stockpile of resources with the marketplace. Of course, you also have a big other stock of resources which we go in the bank at the beginning of the game. Now, when it is your turn, you roll the die, Catan style, and the hexes indicated by the number that is rolled, 2 or 4, whatever, will produce resources that turn. And the players that have a castle adjacent to a hex which is producing a resource will collect that resource. Catan style. I rolled a 4, then I have a castle there, then I get the corresponding resource, which is a sword. If you have multiple castles, then you get multiple resources for each roll. And players receive resources also when it is not their turn. What do you do then with your resources? Well, you can trade them. Once per turn, you can trade a resource from your stockpile with one that is in the marketplace. You simply take your resource and replace it. Quite simple. And players this way can manipulate the marketplace. And the only way to refresh the marketplace entirely is when there are 5 resources all of the same type. In that case, you remove them and you place again 1 per type. You can also always trade 2 copies of any one resource with a copy of another resource from the bank. And you can also choose to play the advanced game, which is when players can trade with each other, but frankly I quite like the idea of trading with the marketplace or with the bank only. What are you trying to do with these resources? Guess what? You're trying to build stuff. And you have a player that tells you the stuff that you can build. You can build a new castle by spending these resources. You can build a new ship by spending these resources. In order to build a new castle, you need to be able to reach an empty location with a ship. So in that case, I would be able, by spending these resources, to build a new pirate abode there. In order to go to another location, then you need to build a ship. Pretty much like in Seafarer of Catan, where you create chains of ships and buildings. If I remember Seafarer correctly, I haven't played it in a couple of years. If you play this, if you play these resources, you buy one of these tiles. These tiles are placed face down in a stack at the beginning of the game. Once you purchase one, you simply draw one, you flip it face up, and you look at the symbol that is on it, and that indicates the advantage that you get. Here, for example, you can build a ship or a castle. Here you get some resources. The resources indicated on the card. Here you can move the robber, the ghost pirate, the pirate. I'll talk about the pirate later. Well, let's talk about it now. It's very similar to what happens in Settlers. You move it to a location. The X in which the pirate is does not produce resources. But when you place the pirate in an X, then you get 2 copies of the corresponding resource. So if I'm placing the pirate there, I'm getting 2 molasses. As for the tiles, the cool thing is that the player who has the majority has an advantage. So after you receive the benefit, you place the tile by your play area to record the number of tiles that you purchased. And if you have the majority, you get to place one of your castles in the central island. Which means, for all intents and purposes, that building counts as built. Of course, people may lose majority when they tie, in which case you remove the building and no one has majority, and then maybe somebody else gets majority and then they get to place their building there. So this is the basic idea of the game. Players roll, collect resources, they may or may not move the pirate, they trade from various sources, they try to build chains of buildings and ships, because ultimately the victory condition is the first player to place all of their buildings on the board as the winner of the game. My daughter really likes this game. The idea of collecting resources, you get stuff, and get this, she almost couldn't believe it. You get stuff when it's not your turn. Her mind was like blown. Because in King of Tokyo, you get stuff when it's your turn, you roll dice, you have to work for it. You're just sitting there, damn, right there, a goat is coming, a barrel of molasses falling from the sky. It's almost like a miracle. She loves that. She loves to create the sets, and she loves to catch to get the tiles. It's like her favorite thing, which actually is a pretty good strategy. That's her main strategy, just to buy a lot of tiles. But actually, she uses the resources that she gains from the tile far from mindlessly. The art is nice. The pirate theme is cute. So it's an interesting thematic reimagining of Settlers. Everything is colorful, the components are very durable. As a game to play with a small child, this is definitely a good one. I don't remember the recommended age printed on the box, but there is no written text that the child needs to learn, needs to be able to read. There are those nice player aids. My 4.5-year-old daughter is perfectly capable of playing the game and occasionally to win. Yeah, she did win against me. And I wasn't trying to help her or to let her win. Maybe I gave her a recommendation at some point. She had a majority of like 7 tiles, and I said, maybe you wanna buy something else, but other than that, she definitely got the general philosophy of the game. She really figured out what the game is about, which is about winning against Dad. Something else very important I have to say about this game is that I vastly prefer playing this game than regular Settlers. At least I'm talking about the basic Settlers. Yes, things change a little bit when you add expansions, but for one thing, it is shorter than regular Settlers, and that to me is a great thing. Even if I manage to bring myself back to play Settlers, I really doubt that the game, in the basic version at least, has enough to hold my attention for the time that it actually takes to play the game. And regular Settlers is so heavily based on luck. Yes, there are things that you can do, you can manipulate things, yes, you can improve your chances, etc, etc. But let's face it, if your numbers don't hit, your numbers don't hit. If you don't have cards to trade, you cannot trade. If you don't get any resource, you don't get any resource. And you're stuck sitting there while other people are playing, which is something that I really did not like about the original game. I don't mind simple games, I don't mind long games, but when there's a game in which the players are not always engaged, then to me that is a problem with the design. Here the configuration of the locations on the board, to start with, will give you something almost every turn. So it is not so much about am I going to get something or am I going to get nothing. It's about what am I going to get. Most times you will get stuff, you will pile up resources, and that changes the angle of the game, which really becomes not only about grabbing as many resources as you can or minimizing your chances of not getting anything, but about using the resources. So to me the game feels actually more nuanced. It feels to me that there are more decisions to make when you're trading with the marketplace, when you're choosing what to build, of course. You have, my impression is that there are more decisions to make, there is more thinking to do than in regular Settlers, while you're feeling engaged more often most of the time, and for an overall much shorter span of time. To me, frankly, this is a vast improvement over regular Settlers. I'm sure there are players that have played a lot, and maybe in recent versions they tweak things around, but as of now, I don't feel like going back to regular Settlers at all, but I really don't mind playing Catan Junior with my daughter, and honestly, I wouldn't even mind playing it as a light filler with adults. Probably would take 20 minutes or less to play, but as a beer and pretzel game, there are other games that definitely will offer less options and less engagement and less involvement and with less attractive components. Overall, to me, this is a pretty good game. I'm pretty impressed by the game, by how well it works with little children. I'm pleased that my daughter loves it so much. I don't mind playing it at all, and again, maybe the surprise bottom line, I think that this is a game that can work perfectly well as a light filler for adults.